Yeah, you started there. Well, I just copied what these guys did, so to be honest with you. So for me, the digital side of things is so it's new and it's evolving, so it's hard to really pinpoint how it's changed. But for me, it's moved from VHS to DVD to Blu-ray. So the only thing I notice is more obvious because now that we have like 125-inch TVs in our houses, you can actually see how the film was meant to be seen in the theater, but at home. So I might be a bit of a heathen, but I think it's helped the move to digital. I go in here, mate.
Working.
Is it not?
It's not working.
That one is
But back in the 90s, it seems to me that maybe Lawrence Arabia and Vertigo and films like that were being restored. The word restoration was considered something with these huge prestige epic films. And then you start looking at Hammer films, I think, first, and Daughters of Darkness and things like that, and doing essentially the same work that they were doing on Vertigo and Lawrence of Arabia, maybe not spending quite the same dollars, but you were applying it to film, to genre films, and lo and behold, there was actually a market for it, where people actually finally got to see these movies in the way that they were supposed to be seen. It's a massive upgrade from VHS to, well, I guess it was Laserdisc first, but then DVD. Laserdisc, yeah. Guess what? I just repaired my Laserdisc player. It's sitting broken. You know what I got paid to have it fixed? Or just delivered it up? Oh, just delivered it up was given. But I had to actually hand deliver it to the shop in Sacramento, and it's costing me nearly $500 to fix this Laserdisc player. DVD. Well, I got Laserdisc. What the hell? I'll fix it. Anyway.
But yeah, Dave, you're 100% right because Bill, giving you sort of treatment that Lawrence of Arabia was getting, but putting that on Emmanuel in America, so giving people like me a chance to see that film finally in its entirety was incredible.
Yeah. Well, a lot of these films have not been released even uncensored. Even though, the 4:3 to the correct aspect ratio was obviously a big upgrade, but Dario Argento's movies, which are kind of relatively big movies in this world, had still never been out in the US until you need that.
The thing was, we were doing that in Japan on Laserdisc. They were bringing it to the proper aspect ratio. But in America, they weren't. It was after that I had to spend
Might not like everything to do. It's a full range, full church. I remember there was a film, and it's a French or Belgian film, and it's called Le Sadique aux Dents Rouges, The Sadist with Red Teeth. And I was obsessed with this film from when I was a kid. It was in a book, I think it's called The Seal of Dracula, Barry Patterson's book, The Seal of Dracula. It was the first book that I came across, published in the 70s, that dealt with horror films outside, France, well, outside the UK and America, really. And it had a still from this film, The Sadist with Red Teeth. And I was obsessed with seeing this film, and it was never been on video, never screened outside France or Belgium. And eventually, cut a long story short, I found out who owned the rights to it. We did a deal to release this film, 2 films by the same director. And it got the worst reviews that we've ever had. And I remember I responded, these were the days when you could respond to reviews on Amazon and so on. I don't think you can do that now. But I responded saying to this guy, if you don't like this film, you don't really understand what we're trying to do. And he responded and said, if you release another film like this, I'm never going to buy anything else that you release. And obviously I didn't respond and saying, fuck you, but you've got to have the courage of your convictions. And I think this is, I don't know what this has got to do with the restoration.
I think, Pete, what it is there are really fundamentally...
These are working now.
There are fundamentally 3 markets in physical media. There is the mass market, which is Batman and, all those Marvel films, all the big films. And the people who watch them don't care if they see them streaming, physical. They don't care where they see it, in the theater, whatever. That's the blue collar, people who watch movies. Then you have the other market, which is a big market, which is the budget. The people who want 4 horror films for $5, they want them all on one disc. They don't care about the compression rate. They don't care about extras. They just want to smoke a joint and drink a 6-pack on Saturday night and watch 4 horror films for $5. Then we have a very narrow but loyal market, which are the collectors, who are fanatical. And they are the most vocal, and they want to see what they want to see to perfection. And they want you to go to cemeteries to dig up people for interviews. They don't understand maybe how come the star of the movie isn't, interviewed. Well, he's, kind of been dead for 20 years, Anyway, so we have that market, which is what we cater to. And they are perfectionists. And that's where restoration comes in. Because we're dealing with, look, we all don't look like what we did 40 years ago. Neither do the negatives of these movies. They're pretty, they get worn and that's what they are. So we have to take these old negatives and bring them up to a standard without it not looking like film. We always want it to look like that it's a film and not a video. So we have to really be careful with restoration, because you can go too far and suddenly it doesn't look like a movie anymore. Subconsciously, I don't know how many people would. We know it. We look at it, we could tell. But, the general public doesn't know. And, but they can feel it. And that's what we cater to, and that's the art of our business. There is an art that's business, but then there's an art. And the art is, the restoration without destroying it.
Getting it right.
Yeah.
Balancing so many different...
Yeah. You're constantly second-guessing yourself.
I think it would be interesting for the audience perhaps to know about this process of restoration. I mean, perhaps you can explain it through an example of one of the works you've done, something that perhaps wasn't easy, but how's this process to, first of all, get to the negative, for instance, or get to the origin of everything, and then work through it.
Well, sometimes the negative isn't available. I mean, the negatives get lost or have been destroyed or are stuck in a studio vault so they can't be accessed. So sometimes you have to get the best element available, which you always want it to be a 35 millimeter film element. But the negative is the best element that you can get. Obviously, it's the film that ran through the camera. And so when you can get that, that's when...
That's the Holy Grail.
That is, yeah, that's the Holy Grail, which I guess more often than not, you can get the negative, right?
It's a question of whether you get the original camera negative versus getting a duplicate.
Yeah, and like a lot of the older Italian films, they have a duplicate negative. It's not the original camera negative. But once you get that, then you pay for it to be scanned. For us, it's usually in the territory where the negative is. In Italy, they won't ship the negatives to the US for us because there's too much risk involved. So it has to be scanned at a local facility, which most big cities now have a 4K scanner of some sort. So you can get the raw scan done in where the negative is, and then we get a hard drive sent over to the US, and then it goes through the process of restoration and color correction. So 2 separate processes in order to create the final master. Anything to add?
Yeah, I think what's important, at least in my case, is in terms of doing the color grading or color correction, I always, when possible, want to have the director or the director of photography involved in that process. Why? Because the original camera negative doesn't have built in any of the color grading. And so you really want the input and the oversight of the director or the director of photography. I can tell you on one of my films, it's devastating. I have a movie that I made called Maniac Cop, and a company put it out, but they barred me from grading the movie. And when I looked at it, it was they had scanned the original camera negative, but didn't understand that much of what they have on it shouldn't be seen. Like you could see where makeup ended and stuff, because now you're going to, to a higher resolution, and they didn't have anybody there, neither myself or the cameraman, supervise it. And so I look at that movie and it's forever ruined, by the stupidity of this company. Ego. That's where ego comes in, because this company likes to say that they oversaw the grading and the color of the movie and the restoration, and if you get involved, then they can't take that credit. It's bizarre. It's very bizarre.
But often the director of photography or the director are dead, so then you have to. Often the only reference you have is a VHS, actually,
Yes.
because a print will have faded, so that won't have the color in it. Whereas a VHS will probably have been taken from
a print.
From a print, and therefore the color is in the VHS. So a VHS
Exactly.
is a better reference than.
But I can't tell you how valuable it was on Daughters of Darkness to fly Harry Kumel, the director, from Belgium to the lab in Rome to have him oversee the grading on it. It really, really made a difference. It just, our master on Daughters of Darkness, I'll say modestly, is spectacular. Yeah, and it's because of the director, not because of me. It was because of the director of the film overseeing the grading.
But sometimes the licensor doesn't want that. In the case of a movie called Zulu Dawn, the director of photography is in Los Angeles, still alive and willing to do the grade, but the licensor did not. They wanted it doing at their facility under their terms. We had to fight. It's now happening, but it's taken about 3 years for us to convince them to actually ship the raw scan to Los Angeles so the director of photography can supervise.
It's insane.
Maybe you can use this one.
Here.
Hello.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Working, yeah.
One of the things that comes up with that, and There's, deal, whatever. I- And that's
Happened
the
with Deep Red? Didn't that happen with Deep Red?
On which one?
Aspect ratio?
deep,
Oh, Deep Red.
There are ones changed the aspect ratio, right?
yeah.
Well,
Hello. So there are issues. There are political issues broadly, like the ones you talked about, but creative ones as well.
I'll tell you something funny. When we did the 4K restoration of Toolbox Murders, the original SD grading of it was supervised by the director of photography, and we used that as a reference when we did the HD, and because he's dead. And then when we did the 4K, I'm watching the movie, and I'm saying that the last part of the movie is wrong, even though the director of photography approved it. I looked at it and I said, this is supposed to be evening, not day interior. And of course, I have my associate, who's really good to have, a guy by the name of Greg Chick, who's sitting, well, the fans are going to be mad because you're changing it from all the other versions of the movie. And, you know, I said, but Greg, this is the way it should be. That shouldn't be the way it was supervised before. This is it. And I said, I don't give a shit what the fan, he'll always tell me they're going to go on the forums, they're going to say how bad it is, that we did the wrong thing, and all the rest. I don't know if they have or not, but I just know that it was the right thing to do.
So you changed it.
Change it. I changed it from what to correct it. I mean, if you hear crickets, you know that you're not in daylight.
Yeah, one of the things about grading is quite often it's done without any audio, isn't it? So the day for night is a classic one. You know, particularly on the lower budget films, they didn't have the money, the facilities to get the lights and shoot the nighttime scene with, you know, lights. So they would shoot it in the day, and then they would just grade it so that it looked dark. You know, I think the French call that the American night, don't they? La nuit américaine, you know. And when you're grading from a negative, and I've come across this many times, I'm sure you both have, it just looks fine, you know, and the grades, and then it's afterwards when you put the audio on and you realise that they're talking about it being at night, and then you have to go and do it again.
Well, I have a story. The opening of Maniac was shot day for night, and when I saw it in France, it was daylight. Why? Because we shipped the negative to France, but we never sent them a check print from America for them to check the grading against. And that's when I learned about the value of check prints from that experience of going, my God, it's daylight. It's daylight, the opening of the movie. And yeah, that really drove me crazy.
I mean, it's a big question about restoration. If you look at what people do in the antiques world, which I guess is related, nowadays, when they do restoration on antiques, they leave in signs of aging and they leave in mistakes and so on. And it's always a big thing when you're doing films. Do you correct mistakes? And I've come across things where, like, there's a spelling mistake even on the titles, and you kind of think, you know, that's really, you know, that's wrong, and it looks wrong and it's silly, but it was wrong in the original. So should we change it or should we leave it?
I went through that on a release that's coming out this month called Quiet Days and Clichy. The opening card, we corrected it when we did the SD, and I think even with the HD, we corrected it. But on the 4K, they have it misspelled in the original credits. And I said, Greg, you know, I looked at it, Greg said, do you think we should change it? I said, I mean, it's easy to change, but that's the original movie. Maybe we should just say fuck it and leave it on there.
We had a movie called Burial Ground, which is an excellent Italian zombie movie, but it has a quote at the end, and it's famous for being bad English in this quote at the end. So if we'd have corrected it, we'd have ruined the end of the movie.
Yeah, our latest was a Jess Franco film, The Other Side of the Mirror, Spanish, obviously Spanish film. And there's a title at the front saying that the award of the Critics' Prize was given to Emma Cohen. You know, was obviously a well-known actress in those days. But they'd misspelt it, and it's Enma Cohen. And I was looking at that and thinking, it looks like Enema Cohen. We've got to change this. And in fact, we did change it. And I don't know whether anyone's commented on that, but now it's out.
I'm going
in the
on the
open.
forums.
We'll get some hate mail, I don't doubt. You know. Maybe we should have done 2 versions of the film.
Yeah, put 2 versions on. That'd be the answer.
I would like to know also, I mean, we're talking about the restoration, the lights, etc. But there is also, you talked earlier about some films that perhaps are lost or have perhaps some scenes that were never seen. How is the process not to restore that, but to do the archaeology, to know what place these scenes had in the movie? I mean, there is some kind of film historian work, right?
Definitely. But we have a Jess Franco film called Bloody Moon, and it's a masterpiece of a film. But it's all the gore has been cut out of the negative, and so on the DVD and then the subsequent Blu-ray, we had used a 1-inch video master for the gore bits, but we want to do a UHD of this movie that just about passed muster on. It definitely did on the DVD, but on the Blu-ray, it's starting to really show up that it was a standard definition source for the gory bits. Now on 4K, it just can't be done. So we're trying to scour the globe to find a print of Bloody Moon. But unfortunately, it was released everywhere. It was released theatrically. It was released with those scenes cut out. It was only released on video with the goriest bits. And obviously, those are pretty important bits for a film called Bloody Moon. So anyway, the search goes on, and hopefully we'll find them. Otherwise, it's just going to remain on Blu-ray, and that'll be the highest it can go.
And you do have to have that sort of historian knowledge, because these films were always sort of cut differently depending on the territory. So the film in France may be completely different to the version shown in Germany and Italy and Japan. So yeah, you have to have known the film inside out in various countries, not just the film itself. In like the UK, it's so different. So yeah, you really have to love these films to give them the treatment they deserve.
I think we come across something like... Hello, yeah. We come across something like that, and it's happened a couple of times with Lucio Fulci film, 2 Lucio Fulci films, that we found there were different versions in different countries. But my feeling was that if Fulci shot all of that stuff, he intended it to be in the montage somewhere. So, you know, it's a difficult one, because you do get people who complain and say, this is not the official version, or this is not the original released version. And I kind of feel, but yeah, it was probably the version that the director intended, but maybe censorship at the time, or the producer deciding it was too long, you know, these kinds of things. You have to make that kind of decision. And often the bits that are removed probably aren't important to the story, but they add nuance, and they develop the character a little bit more. And I think, you know, it's and there's a couple of cases where we've done this, and I've always been very happy with the end results, and thought that the film, you know, is deserved having that little bit of polish added to it that maybe wasn't there originally. But there's an argument around whether you should do that or not, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they were deleted for a reason, though. So the fact that those scenes exist, if you don't have the director to actually ask, you do have to make a creative choice as to whether to put them back in the film. We did that with Bloody Judge, didn't we, when we got the negative out of MGM, I think it was. But there was a whole sex scene with in the prison that we were like, well, obviously this has to go back in the movie, but it was never in any release version that had previously come out. But that became the new release version.
You know, our customers, all of our customers, they view these movies, they don't sit back and enjoy them. What they do is they review it. Like, you guys remember the Kennedy assassination? There was the Zabruta film. And they go through the movies frame by frame by frame, and they compare it, and they try to find where we made mistakes and things like that. So, yeah, they just are not casual viewers of movies.
Perhaps before opening the questions to the audience, one last question from my side. You're like specialized in rarities, we would say. Is there a film, perhaps like a holy grail, that you've always wanted to restore, to work on it, and somehow, perhaps because it's lost, perhaps because you didn't find the right print, whatever, you haven't had the chance to work on it?
Oh yeah, happens all the time. In some countries in particular, Brazil's one, where there's a film, I won't mention the title or anything, that stuff. It is not a great, well-known film, but it was a Brazilian-French co-production, and it screened at Cannes and so on in 1971, I think. And I fell in love with that film. I mean, it must have been screened on Brazilian TV, because I was able to find a copy, but I can remember, I watched that film. I normally watch films once. If I don't like them, then I forget about them. And maybe if I like them, I'll watch them again. But this one, I probably screened 6 or 7 times over the course of a week. I don't know why. There was something about it, the atmosphere. But trying to get access to the film, the negative, and the rights to that movie proved to be proved to be impossible. I haven't been able to do it. It's particularly the case, and it was the case here, that a large studio was theoretically involved. Everybody I tracked down in Brazil who knew anything about it said, oh, but MGM owns some rights in this. MGM, I wrote to, obviously, said, we don't know what you're talking about, you know, forget it. But no one, if the negative exists in the archive in Brazil, they won't let it come out until MGM and everybody on the contract has signed off on it, which is going to be never, you know. So that's one example, a recent example, but there are many, many such cases. Sometimes they emerge years later. You know, 20 years ago, there was something you were trying to get, and it's impossible, you forget about it, and then suddenly it pops up. Oh, so-and-so is releasing this film. I can tell you that's a bitter pill to swallow, that one, but it happens all the time.
You have one?
I do. This is a tragedy. I wanted to do an upgrade of one of our films called Fight for Your Life. I think that movie is a masterpiece of exploitation. That film, I can't say enough good things about it. And I had scanned the original standard definition transfer from the original camera negative supplied by the widow of the producer. So I go back 10 years later to relicense the film and ask that the negative be shipped again back to California, only to find out the negative was destroyed in Hurricane Sandy in New York. It was a big hurricane, and her basement was flooded where she was storing this priceless negative, original camera negative. And she said it was destroyed in Hurricane Sandy, and that was the only negative available on the movie. There was no duplicate negatives, nothing. Only that one negative, which I kicked myself for ever shipping it back to her.
I got a similar story. I can't mention any names of any of the people involved, but no, I can't, because
Who are these guys gonna tell? We weren't.
Bill, I'm sure you know them. There's a film called Alucarda, a Mexican film. It was the first film we released on Mondo Macabro, and it's a film I absolutely love. And we went, obviously we had the standard definition version. It was on VHS originally. Some years ago, I went back to the company and said, I want to access the negative. I had the negative in my hands. We went to America, went to Los Angeles, we got the neg from collected it from their office, took it to the lab, oversaw the scan and so on, and then sent exactly like you did, we sent the neg back. Anyway, when I contacted them, they said, we don't have the negative anymore. I said, well, where is it? And they said, oh, we threw it away. Oh. We moved the offices and we threw it away. I couldn't believe it. Actually had sleepless nights over it. Because I had that negative in my hand, and it was pristine. There was no marks on it or anything. And it's such I don't know if you know the film, but it's a really great film. And I've got to know the family of the director and so on. He's dead. And I know how emotionally important that was to them, that film in particular. And now it's gone, and it's like Well, it's a real major crime, I think, destroying negatives, particularly of films like that.
Adding to my tragedy on Maniac Cop, the last information I have about the negative, the producer destroyed it, had trashed it. Glickenhaus. Yeah. He was moving. He had it in storage along with other negatives, and he was moving stuff into his garage of his house and had trashed the negative. This is what I was told.
I believe it. And I mean, I said to the guys when I was told this, I said, why didn't you just offer it to us? I'd have paid to have it shipped over and, you know, and Andy, I mean, several times Andy said, we should just buy that film outright from them. I said, well, wait until we got the money. It brings me to tears thinking about that. It's a dreadful thing to do.
We're working on a box set of kung fu movies, Bruceploitation movies, and almost none of those films have a print or a negative or anything in existence. It seems like the Hong Kong film industry, with their exploitation films, once they transferred them to video back in the late 70s, they were like, this is the master, this is as good as it's going to get. Negatives take up too much space, dump them in the river. And so all of those films were bicycled around the world until they ended up in territories and just turned to dust, basically. They were played and played and played until they turned to dust and were thrown away. So there are very few of those films that actually have even a 35mm scratchy print still in existence. So it's been a tough road.
And it's not unique to indie and obscure cinema either, because at Second Sight we're working on The Hitcher at the moment, and for years everyone said the original camera negative is gone, it's lost. The director had no idea where it was, the producer had no idea where it was. They were like, we got our own 35mm prints, but they've been around for so long and they're just deteriorating. And so trying to find the camera negative for that was a challenge, but
They
it
found
ended
it,
up
yeah.
being with Warner Brothers.
Warner Brothers,
It was
yeah.
with Warner Brothers.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
It was in New York the entire time.
Yeah.
At least 6 studios generally look after their stuff.
It's just in
Yeah,
bad condition,
getting it
yeah.
out of them is another question.
A lot of the indie guys, they're probably dead and the family have inherited it. They don't know anything about the film business. They
Yep.
don't know what to do with it. I put it in the garage, you know, where it's kind of rotted or whatever. But
Gonna get the feeling that it's like Indiana Jones, like Warner Brothers, like archive is just in a warehouse somewhere, but no one can be asked to go and actually look.
that's the thing. If you go and actually physically look,
Yeah.
you'll find it. I mean, I remember going to an archive, a storage space in Italy, and I was there for several days, and I was walking along these aisles, and they were stacked up to the, like, you know, it was like an aircraft hangar,
Yeah.
stacked up to the rafters with tins of films. I was just going along, reading the titles, and thinking, my God, that actually still exists. But doesn't
I went to James Kenham Clark's house in Norfolk, and he'd kept his negatives in his barn for 40 years. And I went into this barn, because we'd already done a transfer of it in London, and it was in terrible condition. But then the director died, and so we went to actually buy out the movies. I went to this barn in the north of England, and it was a barn with a massive hole in the roof. So it was all rotten cans of film with pigeon shit all over it. I would pick them up and they would just crumble in my hands. So yeah, he didn't really take care of his materials. James Kenham Clark, who did House on Straw Hill, the films with Fiona Richmond. I mean, he had like 6 movies basically. Yeah.
I think it's a good time to, I don't know, ask if you have actually some questions, some perhaps someone wants to ask something. Yes, no? Then perhaps I will ask a last question, because I think actually we don't have much time. I don't know if you can share with us a project, upcoming project that you all have in your hands.
I'll share one because it's haunting me. We decided to, we've never done it before, and I think I'm going to say we'll never do it again, but we decided to do a box set of films, and these were Indian films. Okay, now when it comes to film preservation and restoration, India is a long way behind America and the UK and so on. Even an Indian film 10 years old has deteriorated to the point where it's not usable. The films we're talking about from the 80s, so the condition of those films was absolutely, well, actually one of them, the most recent film, was spotless, but the rest of them were absolutely appalling. And our restoration guy has basically had a nervous breakdown working on one of these films. He works on it for weeks and weeks and weeks. We still haven't had his bill. And he's now disappeared off to the country and doesn't answer emails. And I kind of send him messages saying, what about the other 3 films that you've got? And that's an upcoming project. I probably better not say any more because it's supposed to be going on sale at the end of this month. So they're real nightmares. And again, that was something that we released those films on DVD many years ago. And the DVD masters, they look fine on DVD. But when I look at them now with a critical eye, I can see that there was lots and lots of things wrong with them even then. But the DVD format obviously is lower resolution and so on, and so you can get away with a whole lot of things that when in HD they're painfully visible. And people often, so we get things, and I'm sure you guys do, when people say, "Oh, but this film looked fine on VHS. Why are you telling me that there's a problem with the negative or whatever?" And you just don't see those things when you're looking at PAL or NTSC, even more VHS. So. The closer you go to quality, to making things look good, the bigger battle you have to fight with the elements and the damage that's done to them, and that I guess is restoration.
That is restoration, yes.
And I'm working on a film called Uzumaki, a Japanese movie from like 20 odd years ago. But even that, the original scan goes back to what Bill said. The directors had no input on it, and they've literally just sent out the raw scan. There's like no color grade in it whatsoever. And the version that went out in the US earlier this year is the raw ungraded scan. So yeah, we're having that graded in Japan at the moment by the director. So yeah, it will be seen eventually again as the director intended next year.
What company put it out in the States?
Discotech. Discotech.
Media. I think they're based in Florida.
Oh, well, Florida.
We're working on a lot of Spanish films, most of which have not had a home video release in the US. So that's exciting. But a bigger Spanish film that we're working on is Acción Mutante, Alex de la Iglesia's first film. So that's almost complete. So that's exciting because it'll be the first time it's ever been out in the US officially. Because there was music clearance issues going back to the original release. That's why it never came out in the US. So we're finally putting it out.
I'm currently working on what I call the Heaven's Gate of my company, a movie called Goodbye Uncle Tom. This movie, well, it's actually 2 movies, and the horror that I've been through on these movies, I'm now a year and a half, and I still don't have finished scans. I mean, I still have a English scan that just arrived that I'm checking as we speak. The Italian we checked, and it was missing frustrating frames. It was missing frames in the movie. I mean, it's just, I don't know why, it's going to be like this is a project that's, it's going to be way, way more than it should have cost. And one of the things I don't really let, I know it's, I have an angel and a devil on my shoulders, like in Animal House. I have an angel and a devil, and the thing is I always spend more than I should on everything that we do because I just want it to be right. And if it isn't right, I just don't want to put it out because I just feel as though that it's all about the collector, and I want to give them the best quality that we can. And if I know I can improve it and it's only a question of dollars, I'll do it. You know, we just finished Quiet Days and Cliche, a black and white movie from 1970. We did on it over 500 hours of restoration on the movie, you know? And I even went back for more, you know. I was at 400, and I wound up going back for more because I said, you know, there's some little tiny things I'm seeing, and, you know, I just wanted to go in there and do it. But I didn't change the title that's misspelled.
So I was briefly in the restoration room with you when you were doing Maniac. You were seeing things that the human eye cannot see. I mean, I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? You were like on the frame and like, look, there's a little speck over Joe's shoulder. I'm, really? And it's like, got to be taken out.
Do you know Greg is now got that eye? Yeah. He looks at this stuff the same way I do. I trust him. I trust him because he wasn't trained by you.
Well, I think this is a nice way to finish this roundtable. I think that very entertaining and also very wise with a lot of expertise. And I think that very interesting for all of us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For your time, and thank you all also for coming.
Thank you, everyone.